So again, I'm Mark Teddemer, Irvine Ranch Water District, Recycle Water Customer Development Manager. And we're calling this presentation Recycle Water Local, Reliable, and Safe. So a little bit about IRWD. That image is of the County of Orange. The dark part of that is the area that Irvine Ranch Water District serves. It's about 180 square miles, or about 20% of the total area of the County of Orange. Our residential population, about 400 and almost 50,000, but that does grow during the day when all the business folks are coming into town. 120,000 plus service connections. We serve all of the city of Irvine and then portions of Lake Forest, Newport, Tustin, Costa Mesa, Orange, and some of the unincorporated Orange County. At IRWD, we think of ourselves as having basically four general lines of business. Drinking water, which is what we started with back in 1961 when we were formed to provide a new source of water into the region. That led to eventually getting into the sewage collection business, which we do, and that's a natural transition from sewage collection into the treatment of that for recycled water. The other thing we've done more recently is urban runoff treatment. For those who happen to have been to the San Joaquin Marsh, which is very close to our large Michelson Water Reclamation Plant, we actually pump water out of San Diego Creek, send it into a series of what looks like ponds. It's actually a very slow-moving channel, but a series of ponds where nature cleans up that water for us. We then take that product and put it back into San Diego Creek. Why? Is because for many, many years, the upper Newport Bay suffered with a lot of serious algae problems, and it was becoming a persistent problem. And the urban runoff was thought to be a significant part of the problem. And so what we do is we pump that water out of San Diego Creek, which is largely urban runoff for a lot of the year. We put it into those ponds. It gets the natural treatment, thus the name, natural treatment system, and we put it back into the creek. So we're not consuming that water, we're just taking it, cleaning it up, and putting it back. We also now have 30 or so smaller versions of that spread throughout our service area. So nothing as large as the San Joaquin Marsh, but smaller inline versions of the same thing where that urban runoff can run through and get cleaned up before it goes into the creeks, rivers, and eventually to the ocean. So it's a newer thing we do, and we're really proud of the contribution to help the community have cleaner water courses. So first question is, what is recycled water? And that's a good question. And then what can it be used for? That picture, for those who may have happened to have been to the Great Park Ice, that's a new training facility for the Ducks. That ice is recycled water. I'd like to say we're the first in the state of California, but we weren't. We were the second in the state of California to do that. Ontario Rain out in Ontario is the first one to actually use recycled water to make ice. So boring textbook definition here. The state actually defines what recycled water is, so it's not what IRWD or Moulton or anybody else says it is. The state tells us what it is. Water which is the result of treatment of waste is suitable for a direct beneficial use and is considered a valuable resource, and that's very true. In fact, today, well, many years ago, recycled water was really thought to be, how do we use it? How do we dispose of it? Today, agencies will actually fight over it, not literally, but they will actually go and seek wastewater because they want to turn it into recycled water, because what used to be something we would want to not gather is something we will now actively seek to collect and reuse. That's the change, the paradigm shift that's gone on in recycled water. It's pretty amazing, and it's considered a valuable resource. The next piece here is just, I thought it's sort of a good context. It's I think a lot of water agencies point to when they try and urge the use. The state has said that it's a waste of potable water if recycled water is available. And so we try to sort of take that as our marching orders, that if we see somebody who's using potable water and we have enough recycled water and we have a distribution system to support the use, we would like to see it be done. So that's an important sort of foundational part. So what can be done with recycled water? I apologize for the small font, but so certainly irrigating residential landscaping, we do a lot of that. Parks and playgrounds, schoolyards, golf courses, freeway landscaping, food crops, yes, you can irrigate. This is for disinfected tertiary recycled water, which is basically what we find here in South County. You can irrigate food crops where the recycled water comes in contact with the food crop itself. Cooling towers. We have, at IRWD, have over 30 cooling towers that use recycled water. You can use it to make concrete. Construction activities, a lot of that goes on. You can use it for dust suppression, compaction. That's an approved use. You can use it for firefighting, both interior sprinklers as well as exterior and wildland. They can actually, sometimes you'll see helicopters will dip in and take water from a reservoir. Sometimes those are recycled water reservoirs. You can use it for firefighting. That's an approved use. Composting, toilet and urinal flushing. IRWD was the first agency in the state of California to work with a customer to dual plumb a high-rise office building. That was 1991. Today we have over 140 buildings that use recycled water for flushing toilets and urinals. You can use it in unrestricted impoundments, which means you could fill a lake with it and people would be allowed to swim in it. That's an approved use. I didn't say pools, impoundments. Sometimes people think it's the same thing, it's not quite. You can use it for snowmaking. I would love to add that to my resume one day, that I got snowmaking on my list, but I don't see that happening. And ice rinks. These are all things you can do with recycled water. So you can do a lot with recycled water. So the first part is the local supply. That's a picture of our Michelson water recycling plant in Irvine. So we heard a lot, this is probably the third or fourth time we've seen this image of the state of California, and what I want you to take away is that we rely on water, for imported water, traveling great distances, and we rely on those conveyance systems to carry that water to us, to keep us with this imported water supply. And while that's worked for a long time, it has vulnerabilities. We heard earlier about how the snowpack is an important part. It's a sort of an above ground reservoir, but obviously with climate change and warmer weather, that's going to become strained. But the point of this is that we bring in water from great distances to keep us in the imported water side. Where does recycled water come from? That's an image of IRWD's wastewater collection system. That's where we get recycled water. So we're not relying on it traveling great distances from across the state or from other states. We're collecting it right in our own backyards and reusing it. So it is a local supply, and that's the strength, I believe, of recycled water. In fact, it's that way, and because of that, it's reliable. It's local, and therefore a very reliable supply of water. So here's a little snapshot of where it comes from and what we can do with it. So on the blue, we see where does that recycled water start? It starts as dishwasher, showers, sinks, yes, toilets and washing machines. All that is gathered through the collection system I just showed you on the previous slide. It goes to a treatment plant, and this happens in many agencies here in Orange County, and we turn it into irrigation, cooling towers, all the rest of the things I mentioned earlier. So that's the water cycle right there, is we collect it, take it to a treatment plant, treat it, and reuse it. And that's all happening right here. It's all local. So we think that's a real strength. Reliability, that picture right there is Hyatt House Hotel, which to our knowledge is the first hotel, at least in the state of California, maybe the nation, that uses recycled water in every one of the 149 guest rooms. The toilets are flushed with recycled water. That went on in 2018 or 19, I think. So appreciate Hyatt House stepping forward and doing that. So reliable to use, and this is really sort of a look back as to why I claim the reliability part of that. We've been doing it for decades. IRWD started delivering recycled water back in 1967, and I think that time frame is roughly true for a lot of the other agencies, Moulton, El Toro, et cetera. We've been doing it a long time. Recycled water sales represents about 25% of all of our water sales, so it's a significant portion of our portfolio. IRWD serves more than 400 HOAs with recycled water for irrigation, some for, as I indicate, over 40 years. They've been doing it a long time. And last fiscal year, they used about 10,000 acre feet per year. That's water agency speak, but that represents about almost a third of all the recycled water we deliver is for irrigation uses at an HOA. So it's a significant part of what we do, and we've been doing it a long time. And I think that speaks to the reliability, not only of our collection, our treatment systems, our storage facilities, but our distribution systems as well. We deliver recycled water every day, and a lot of the other agencies do as well. And so reliability is an important part of what we do, and we recognize that, and I think we do a good job of delivering on that. Safe to use, I'll probably talk a little bit more about this than a lot of other things because it's an important part of the conversation. That picture is a strawberry field using recycled water to grow strawberries in our service area. So it's a well-regulated industry, and I say that meaning there's a lot of agencies that are involved that we work with and look over our shoulder to make sure we are doing this properly. The State Water Resources Control Board, I'm talking about Sacramento, they are responsible for recycled water policy as well as two important parts of the regulation, Title 22, which defines what recycled water is and the things you can do with it, and then Title 17, which talks about cross-connection control to make sure we don't contaminate our potable water systems with recycled water. There's a State Water Resources Control Board Division of Drinking Water. They're more local, they're in Santa Ana. They look at some of the projects that we do to convert to recycled water, and they review engineering reports that we produce in support of those projects as well. The Santa Ana Regional Water Quality Control Board, they're the ones that issue permits for us to collect and produce recycled water. So it's that permit which authorizes us to have recycled water programs. And then we also work with Orange County Healthcare Agency. Their focus is largely on backflow protection, cross-connection matters. So they work with us on a local basis when we hook up projects to make sure everything is proper. So some of the regulations I mentioned, Title 22, that defines what recycled water is and the approved uses. Title 17 is cross-connection control. There's also the California Plumbing Code, which does really focus on the interior uses like toilet and urinal flushing I mentioned. So that's where we find information from the Plumbing Code. And then there's also water agencies, the permits I mentioned, there are conditions of use that we find in there as well. So that's a place we take some of our marching orders. As well as every water agency has its own rules and regulations. A lot of it emanates from the things I just mentioned, regulations, et cetera, but some have their own. So that's another place that we get some of the regulations or conditions of use. So to drill down a little bit more on that and things that I think the HOAs would understand. So in our permit, I think it's a pretty universal truth that every recycled water use site must have an on-site site supervisor. And that individual, and it's commonly your landscaper, is responsible for the maintenance of the facilities to make sure everything is proper. There's no cross connections, the rest. And so when we have an inspection or a cross connection test with our customers, we'll typically meet with a landscaper and go through the systems and make sure everything is proper. We don't have cross connections, they have signage up, tags, et cetera. That permit says we have to have periodic inspections. What is periodic? It's undefined. That may change soon. The state board is working on some new regulations and that may become defined in the future, but today it's not. So every agency is a little bit on their own to decide what they think of proper periodic inspection. Other than dual plumb, those are required annual inspections, but irrigation sites, it could be every year or 2 or 4. It really depends on what the agencies want to do. But that may change in the near future based on some of the new policies coming forward. The other thing is that we hear a lot about keeping the water on the property, and that's very true. In fact, our permit says you must maintain the water on the property in which it's used. So we don't want to see runoff, certainly not of potable water. We heard about the runoff. That's not something we want with potable water. We don't want it with recycled water either. So when we do those inspections, we're trying to work with the landscapers to say, hey, can we make some adjustments here and try and keep the water on the property? There's no point in watering concrete. It's not going to grow. So a little more about protecting public health. Mentioned that we have a permit issued by the Regional Water Quality Control Board. They require we do extensive monitoring at our treatment plants. We actually have 2, the Michelson plant in Irvine and the Los Felices plant in Lake Forest. So we do volumes of regular water quality monitoring to make sure we're in compliance with state requirements. Talked about backflow protection on domestic water supplies. That little picture in the upper right, that's a backflow device. So if you've seen that out and wondered what that is, that's a little device that makes sure when potable water goes into the property, it can't come back out into the public distribution system. And so if for some reason somebody should inadvertently cross-connect potable and recycled water on their property, at least the problem is contained on the property. It doesn't get back into the public system, which would be a huge deal. We have separate systems. That next picture to the left there is purple pipe, and I'm sure you've all seen a lot of purple pipe in your service areas and your HOAs, because I know a lot of HOAs use it. That's a key indicator that recycled water is on the property. That's a cue for the landscapers to know this is a separate system. It needs to be treated specially. Don't plug in that new drinking fountain at the HOA to purple pipe. That's not good. We don't want that to happen. And on it is stenciled, "Do not drink." Signage at the site, the state requires that every recycled water use site have some signage to notify the public largely that you're going onto a property where recycled water is present. On-site supervisor training, we do that during our inspections. We have a one-page of do's and don'ts, and we basically go through that with a landscaper. We know they change a lot at properties, so we make sure during that inspection we're getting to the on-site supervisor who's there before us to give them the training. Make sure you don't cross-connect and do not drink and a host of other things. But we've distilled it down to one page to make it simple for them to know the things they need to take away. And then, as I indicated, we do perform periodic visual inspections and cross-connection tests to make sure the signs are up, the tags are there, there's no overspray, no runoff, no cross-connections and the like. So a little bit about how customers are identified, because some may ask, well, why don't I have it? And that's a great question. So a lot of agencies do a lot of master planning, and that starts with what can we do? And so this is an image, I know it's a little hard to tell, but it's an image of a significant portion of IRWD's service area, and all those blue lines are the potable distribution system lines. So pretty much every street has a potable line in it, whether it's serving a resident, an HOA, a fire hydrant, whatever it is. That picture is our recycled water distribution system, and you can see it's not as deep a purple. It's because recycled water goes where the customers are. And so we are driven by where the demands are, where it makes sense for us to build it, because we too pay attention to the cost benefit of expanding our systems. And so I think the recycled water distribution is somewhere in the order of about a quarter, maybe a third of our potable distribution system, because we're very targeted on going where HOAs are, parks, golf courses, et cetera, all the larger customers. So from a master planning perspective, when an agency says, where should we go? These are some of the things they're probably going to ask themselves. They're not engaging with the public yet. But where are these potable demands? They have records of where the potable consumption is. They know how much water is being used. And so they can say, okay, here's some areas we think we should focus on because we see HOAs, golf courses, and the like. That's something we should focus on. Can recycled water be used instead of potable water? There's a lot of uses you can do, but there's some things you can't do. So are the things they're doing there, can we switch it out to recycled water? How much are they using? That sets up sort of this return on, is it cost effective for us to build the pipeline to get there? For what purposes? Do we have enough recycled water? So that's something we have to pay attention to too. I mentioned earlier that sometimes recycled water is something that agencies fight over because they want more of it. And so we have to pay attention. Do we have enough, and can we distribute it to the proper areas? What are the peak demands? Because we've got all these pipes that are of certain diameters, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 inches, et cetera, and we can only push so much water through those pipes. So can we meet the needs of those customers? And if we can, what infrastructure is needed? So it's commonly pipes, but that may lead to pumps or tanks or reservoirs or other things we've got to build all in support of those customers. And then at the end of the day, the agency is going to ask itself, is it cost effective? Can we afford to do it? So that's sort of just a big sort of dots on a map kind of exercise. So then if we get down into specifics, and I'm sure if my counterparts at the other recycled water agencies are like ours, we're getting calls now from interested parties saying, can we use recycled water? We'd like to use recycled water. We don't want to deal with this non-functional thing and functional thing. We just want to go to recycled water. And we appreciate the calls. It's nice when people call us. So there's two tests that I think about in my mind. The first is, does it make sense for the water agency to bring it to you? So is there a pipeline there today? If there is, great. We're well down the road in terms of the ability to potentially serve. If not, should we build one? Does it make sense? Do they use enough water to extend that pipeline to that customer? What is the demand? We talked about that earlier. How much water are they going to use? Do we have enough recycled water to meet their needs? Do we have the hydraulic capacity? Is there a recycled water service? That's the smaller line from the big line in the street to the curb. Do we have a service? If not, should we build one? They can be expensive. We did a project a few years ago to bring the water from the pipeline in the street to the customer. It was almost $100,000. So they're not inexpensive. Some are relatively inexpensive. It really depends on the street, the width of the street, whether there are pipes on the near side, far side, et cetera. But they're not cheap. And if yes, then we say that's a green light project. We should really have meaningful conversations with those customers. So here's where we get into the customer stuff, and this is where you folks all play a large part. What I think of as a second test, the site-specific analysis. What are the uses of recycled water? Irrigation, certainly that would be a yes. Do you have water features or fountains? Are those connected to that system? Do we want to serve those fountains? Do you want to serve those fountains? What does that mean? If not, we've got to get them off of the irrigation, future recycled water, and put them onto something else. Demand, we talked about that. How is the site metered? And this has to do with how easy it is to convert. If you have a dedicated irrigation meter, which means that's an irrigation meter that is only serving landscape irrigation, and assuming the system integrity is correct and there's nothing else on it, that's a lot easier. If you have what I refer to as mixed-use meters, where it's going onto the property, yes, it's going to irrigation, but it's also serving the community room, then that's a little more challenging for us, not impossible, but we've got to separate those systems now. You're going to need to bring a recycled water meter in to serve the irrigation, and we're going to leave a potable meter to serve that domestic use. So it's a little more complicated, but we do it. It can be done. It's just a little more involved. What are the on-site improvements needed? I talked about the metering issue, but what other things need to happen on the property to make sure that the integrity is correct and that we don't have any cross-connection issues going on? We'll do preliminary tests and whatnot to confirm there's no crossover in those systems. So is the recycled water at a proper pressure? If we're delivering potable water to you today at 70 pounds per square inch and our recycled water isn't available at that same pressure, what does that mean? Can you still serve the irrigation off of what we can deliver, or does it need to be boosted? There's an on-site cost, both in capital and operating cost. In some situations, we may have a meter on one end of the property and we have recycled water at the other end, a domestic water over here and a recycle over here. Sometimes we talk about backfeeding the system, which means we would sever the potable and try and connect to the other end of the system and backfeed the other direction. So it's a way to help either us having to build a pipeline in the street or a lot of other on-site improvements. So it's something we talk to the customers about to see if they've got information. And we're acutely aware of the capital cost and the operational cost to convert. We understand what that means to everyone's bottom line, and so I sort of think of it as doing a small pro forma to help understand, here are the capital costs we're going to need to undertake to do this, here's the operational impacts. For a lot of agencies, they sell recycled water at a lower cost. So there's a little bit of an incentive there. But that could be offset by metering, other improvements, booster pumps, and everything's very site specific, so there is no one size fits all. Everything's very individualistic. And my last little plug here is if you have as-builts and they are up to date, those are gold. For those of us in the business who engage with an HOA or a park, whatever it is, one of the first questions we're going to ask is, do you have on-site plans? I think we do. I think they're in the back closet, but I'm not sure. Are they up to date? I don't know. I saw some guy drawing on them the other day. Those things are invaluable for us because it really gives us a quick snapshot of what's going on your property. We'll still do cross-connection tests to make sure everything's proper, but I'm just putting out there, keep those as-builts nearby and keep them up to date because they're really important, independent of recycled water, of course, but if you're going to talk about a possible recycled water conversion, they're invaluable, and we find a lot of places don't have them. The prior landscaper had them in his truck, and we let him go 3 years ago. Or we changed property management people, and whatever. Keep those things nearby. Keep them near and dear. They're really important. So some good news to sort of close this out. Recycled water is typically less expensive. There is typically a discount. And so you want to be aware of that when you consider making that move, that there is a financial incentive that most agencies offer. I don't want to speak for all. MWD, we've heard about grant funding. MWD has a relatively new program where they will help with the on-site costs. Those are all the stuff that's downstream of the meter. Those are HOA property costs. That's your stuff. They actually have a program to help. It's $1,950 an acre foot, which is about $4.47 per CCF, or that's the billing rate nomenclature. It's a one-time payment. So again, it's something that we look at when we put together the pro forma I mentioned. We'll look at the capital cost and we'll factor in this money that can come back to help defray some of those on-site costs. As we heard earlier, and probably one of the strengths of recycled water, it is not subject to the state restrictions we're hearing about now. So if you're on recycled water, good for you. And if you want to get on recycled water, call your agency and see if it's possible. I know we're always happy to take calls. And again, it avoids this whole functional, non-functional turf discussion as we heard earlier from Met. So my hope for the takeaways for you is that it's a reliable local supply of water, and it's certainly that. It is drought proof as long as people continue to use their showers and dishwashers and all the rest, we're going to have recycled water. It is a very valuable resource. Every gallon of recycled water we can use that replaces potable water is potable water we are saving, and so it's really important. And that's why a tip of the cap to all the agencies that do this, because they all recognized a long time ago that recycled water is really the answer to the question, how do we lean out and how do we try to conserve potable water? I hope you take away that this is a well-regulated industry. There are many agencies that we work with and look over our shoulder to make sure we're doing it properly. The other thing I didn't touch on, but this avoids a potential discharge of treated wastewater to the ocean. And that's important too. So if we can turn that water around, instead of sending out to the ocean, we can turn it around and send it back into the community. That's a plus and a real strength of the programs. It may save you money. And again, that's a TBD, it really depends, but I encourage you to talk to your agencies and find out. It may save you money. It certainly supports a conservation ethic and a good water resource management strategy. And for those reasons, I think recycled water is the answer to the question for a lot of you, not all of you, but for a lot of you. And I hope you give a serious look if you're not using it. I think it will go a long way to help. We appreciate that. And with that, I want to thank you for your time and attention on this. And I will be here afterward, by the way, if any of you want to chat. We can catch up after the discussion, so I'm happy to stick around. So thank you very much.